Hello there. It's so good to have you join us for another episode of Beyond Reform, a weekly podcast where we discuss matters related to the transformation of the public sector in the Government of Jamaica. I'm your host, Aniki Clark. Today we are discussing public sector compensation. And my guests are Deputy Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Mr. Wayne Jones. He has responsibility for strategic human resource management, and Senior Director for Compensation, also from the Ministry of Finance, Ms. Janice Stewart. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for stopping by to discuss this very important matter of public sector compensation. Of course, our conversation comes against the backdrop of the implementation of the new system for the public sector, and we will hear how that is going. So if I could start off with you, DFS Jones, could you just remind us as to why the government is introducing this new system around pay and compensation in the public sector?
Hi, Aniki. Thanks for having us. Good to be with you. Agree, this is an extremely important topic, not just for the members of the public sector, but for the country at large, country having such a significant investment in what we're doing. The Government of Jamaica public sector compensation structure is one that has been in place prior to the 1st of April 2022 for many decades, significantly influenced and shaped by the collective bargaining process that is practiced by the unions representing public sector workers and the government as the employer through the various formations, whether it's central government, local government, or through the public bodies community. And over time, we have come to realize that the system has grown very complex. It has grown very complicated, even hard to understand, and it creates frustration in the minds of the people who are part of the public sector and who must benefit from it. It was, and I stress was, happily so, because today yes, with our new compensation structure, we are seeing a whole lot of simplification. We are seeing progress in implementing. But the structure we had before was characterized by 300 and odd salary scales that were, for the most part, unrelated to each other. And so as a member of the public sector, you often look across and ask yourselves, why is that group of workers getting more than I am getting, when in my own mind and perception, I am doing at least the same task, and the value of the task I'm carrying out is no less than they are carrying out, but yet they are paid better, in my view. Also, the long list of nearly 200 allowances that characterize the public sector, with many of them concentrated in few places, like your security subsector, your education subsector, and your health subsector. And even in those areas, the many are applicable to a few. And so the inequity was significantly present in those instances. So to the credit of the trade union movement that represents the workers in the system, they have always complained about the complexity and wanted a simpler system. The Government of Jamaica, therefore working with the unions, thought it necessary to transform and reform the system of compensation. And we worked together for close to 4 years. Many persons don't recognize that it was from 2017 when we agreed to a 4-year contract, 2017 to 2021, that we have been working with the unions, having in 2015 agreed that we needed to do this. And we worked together quietly and behind the scenes. It is when the implementation came that we heard quite a bit of anxiety around that. But that system that we had before, and I hesitate because some people said it wasn't a system, it was just a collection of activities. But that which we had in place did not allow the government as the employer, the largest employer of labor, to be able to attract and retain the best and the brightest in the labor market. And that created some downtime and downsize for the public bureaucracy. And therefore, we had to really do something. Under the new compensation structure, second year, we can say, and I think the evidence is out there, that we have managed to turn things around big, significantly. Some of the complaints people had before, we think were informed and influenced by that which they did not know was awaiting them around the corner. I recall in November when we started the first round in December of 2022 of implementation, there were persons who were saying what their pay was going to be, even without knowing what it was going to be. But that's what change actually does. But since then, we have seen a settling down, a big settling down, Aniki, of the implementation. And we are happy for that. And we are looking forward to greater levels of, let's say, satisfaction and to get rid of some of the disquiet. We do have some outstanding matters, and our union partners and ourselves are working assiduously to get those out of the way.
Okay, great. And I want to bring you in at this point, Janice, because you are in the heart of the actual implementation. What are you seeing from your unit?
Well, with everything new, you're going to have teething pains, dare I say. So mostly we are not going to get the good things. We're going to get the people who are having problems, even if those problems are only perceived. So we get a lot of, I used to get more pay. And most of the time, that's not true. Every now and again, it is. And also the other major issue that we're having is the fact that some persons who were supervisors have, based on the width of the scoring for the evaluation, those positions have landed in the same band.
Explain that for me, the width of the scoring.
Okay, so say, for example, because we have what we are calling the core compensation, the bands, and there are 16 of those. And I can't give precise number, but let's say band 9 is from 150 to 300. And
that's dollars per...
No, score.
Oh, the score.
The points in the band. Mm-hmm. So you were a AM4, that administrative management, level 4, and your score is 200. Your supervisor, who was a SEG1, their score is 280. So they are going to be in the same band. And generally speaking, that would be regarded as an anomaly, because you shouldn't have your supervisor and supervisee being paid in the same pay band, albeit not necessarily the same amount.
But I gather that that's because there isn't enough difference between the two jobs.
Exactly. So, or maybe there is, but as of now, based on the current job descriptions for those jobs, there does not appear to be such a vast difference that they would land in different pay bands. So for that to be fixed, or attempt to be fixed, the jobs would have to be re-evaluated.
And are we seeing a lot of those or a small number?
I'm not sure. From where I'm sitting, the most of them are in a particular group between the senior executive group and the science and technology group.
What are the plans, Mr. Jones, for dealing with those?
So, as is to be expected, we have been developing our structure and systems for fixing the anomalies. Unfortunately, we have not been able to roll out the approaches because we have been detained by working through emerging issues, which must be resolved. As Janice says, anomalies do show up immediately in some instances, and we have to fix those. The multidisciplinary team that work on compensation restructuring has compensation experts as classification experts and others, and we are all caught up in the process and engaged in that process. So we are moving to establish a more structured team or teams of persons who will take these representations and correct them where something is structurally wrong. There are instances where classification will need or reclassification. That includes a job evaluation exercise will have to be done. There are instances where job descriptions will have to be rewritten because, unfortunately, a number of the job descriptions that we have used in doing the compensation restructuring are woefully out of date. So they are not reflective of the current duties being carried out. And so, as Johnny says, they do cause jobs to fall in the same band and therefore the same pay rates. And so we are collecting these. The Scientific Officers Group and ACG Group is service-wide, and that one is very pronounced, and we are collecting the necessary information to work through that one. The other outliers, we do get them, and in fact, we have had a couple of entities submitting for review their classifications and their organizational structures, and those are underway. But where the real anomalies, like the service-wide ones, crop up, because the process did shore up some of these, then we certainly are fixing those using the new job evaluation tool that is in place.
Okay, so I'm an HR director and I see this in my organization. What should I do?
You should formulate a submission to the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, which is the center and the core. If it's something that needs to go to the Transformation Implementation Unit, where we have the compensation team residing, then we advance it to there. If it needs to go to the Corporate Management Establishment Branch, where the Management Analyst review, or if it needs to go to the Compensation Policy Unit, which is the compensation unit in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, it goes there. And all three teams, as needs arise, work together to resolve it. So HR functionaries should just continue to submit their full representations. And it's a good opportunity to remind employees of the public sector, work through your HR functionaries rather than individually you run into TIU to MOFPS or so. It gets greater attention and a more coordinated approach.
Right. When they channel it through
the
HR.
HR functionaries, yes.
All right. Thanks so much for that. I want to turn a little bit back to what you were talking about, Ms. Stewart, around persons saying, that their pay is different from what they used to get. Well, it should be different by at least 20% an increase, but pointing out that these are anomalies, which are not really genuine anomalies. What are those circumstances in which someone perceived would be getting a similar pay package, and then under the new system, they're now getting a different one compared to their colleague?
In a lot of the cases, it's perception. Because you think you know what your colleague was getting. Of course, you know what you are getting. But it's not always so. There's a number of the cases that we've seen, the people have said, Miss Stewart used to get $20, just using an example. And I used to get $20, and now she's getting $40 and I'm getting $30. What caused the difference? What I remind people is that the amount you see on your pay slip, what you need to look at is your gross pay as opposed to your gross, your net, and your take home, which are all different. And a lot of the times what we find is that they're not taking that into account because your personal deductions and my personal deductions are rarely ever the same. So a lot of the times that is what is causing the perceived difference, because when they talk about it's really their take-home pay that they're referring to and not necessarily the gross.
Mm-hmm. Or their net pay, where
yes.
your net pay minus your personal deductions result in your take-home pay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Based on the instructions for implementation of the new system, a lot of persons got what is called a non-taxable temporary allowance, which for most persons will go away in year 3. For some, it won't. And it will then become a personal pensionable allowance. So we've, over the time since December last year, we've had a lot of questions regarding the treatment of the temporary allowance. If you are, say, for example, you're a contract employee getting gratuity, how do you treat it? If you are assigned to act, how do you treat the temporary allowance? Well, last week it was, sir, we sent out a circular regarding treatment of temporary allowance in those cases, which basically says it is to be, if you are being assigned to act or being appointed, it is supposed to be taken into account. The fact that it's non-taxable, in those situations, it will have to be what we call grossed up. That is to take into account taxation, statutory deductions prior to adding it, so that the person can benefit as detailed in the staff orders that says that if you're being assigned to act or being appointed, you should benefit by at least an increment in the higher position. And if you're retiring during the period and you were in receipt of a temporary or non-tax allowance, that is also to be included when your pension benefits are being calculated.
Thank you so much for that, Janice.
And so, to extend what Janice has said, or to just put it simply, it is pay.
Yes.
The temporary allowance is pay. It is non-taxable, but it is pensionable. And the circular makes that clear, that it is a pensionable payment. So when your pension is being calculated, it must be taken into account. And so once it is understood that it is pay, then even setting the rates for certain, overtime, honorarium, and so on, it is pay. You take it into account in setting those rates. It has been introduced to ensure that persons get no less than the 20% net increase that the government has committed to. No less than. So, and this is why it is not a uniform sum. So if you look at your colleagues' temporary allowance, it is different from yours because that colleague's overall payments may have needed a smaller temporary allowance to take them to that minimum 20% over the 3 years than yours, which would have been higher. So the point to note is that the temporary allowance is pay, and it is to be taken into account when calculating pay for whatever assignment in the sector.
But you hinted, Mr. Jones, that the conversation is ongoing with the union partners.
It is indeed. And just picking up on the teaching profession, we have been meeting with the JTA. We have had what I call sleeve rolled up working sessions as distinct from a meeting, a formal meeting. We have gone through the impact of taxation on the calculation of compensation with the teachers, and the JTA representative expressed an appreciation. And in fact, one member I recall saying, why didn't we get this explanation before? But that's just a process, and that's fine. We understand. So we're working with them. There are some instances of errors in the administration of a payroll, not just in the teaching profession, but since we're there. And what we have agreed with the Ministry of Education and Youth and the JTA is that those continue to be laid before MOEY, and Ministry of Education will then work those through. And we have been getting reports that they're working through those. We continue to meet. As a matter of fact, we have met with the new leadership of the JTA, new president and team, since their annual conference, and we continue to work with them on some of those issues as they arise. So the communication is there, the collaboration is there, and we are expecting that as we work with the different groups, whether it's the JTA, whether it's the Nurses Association, the Medical Doctors Association, the Civil Service Association, the Confederation of Trade Unions, that in short order we are going to be able to close this out, because as we prepare to go into the third and final year in 2024 April, we certainly want to make sure that the outstanding matters from the previous 2 years are resolved in a timely manner.
Yes, and you've jumped right into year 3, which is a good place because people are expecting that by year 3, I should have a full grasp, a full understanding of what my new compensation package is like. What can we expect in year 3?
So in year 3, I always remember my minister, when we were doing some town hall meetings, my minister saying, the pay slip you got in December is the most complicated, is the worst you will ever get. I think by now, certainly from the feedback we're getting on the ground, that is becoming a reality. That is the worst you would have seen. Today, people have a much clearer picture. Much clearer picture. People are understanding the pay advice better. In many that I've seen, it's laid out in a more simplified manner, and people therefore can understand. So as we move into year 3, 2024, I expect all the wrinkles to be smoothed out. You are going to have some classification matters because we still need to work through those. In a true sense, those are not compensation restructuring issues. They are classification issues, and we will work through those. But just in terms of strict compensation, representation, and PSYs, people are going to be seeing a much clearer picture. And it is the final year 3. And so you will see your change in the compensation. You will be able now, very importantly, Anik, to relate what you're seeing then to what is the real price of the job. Because let's recall that what we did was to arrive at what the price of the job should be, and that would be at year 3 because we're implementing over 3 years. So we went to year 3 and then we loop back to year 1. Went to year 3, convert you at year 3, and then we came back to year 1 and implement over a 3-year period. So people are going to now be able to see what the true price of their job is come 2024, April 1.
In other words, the true compensation package.
Indeed.
I want to touch a little bit on performance management because the public, as you pointed out at the outset, have an interest in what is happening in the public sector. In the previous dispensation, persons would move along the scale based on their performance, attaining the 75%, and then move up an increment. What would happen in the new system after the government has introduced the new system in its entirety?
All right. So important to emphasize that compensation restructuring is an element of the overall transformation agenda. And the focus of the transformation agenda must be to improve service delivery for the citizens of this country. So performance-based compensation is a feature. In the past, with the structure that we had, it was very, very difficult to align performance with compensation. Under this new system, we have another initiative called the new Employee Performance Management System that we're looking at managing and assessing performance and compensating, rewarding for compensation for performance. In the public sector. So under the new system, we are looking to have multiple, let's say, tiers to recognize and to reward compensation, the details of which are still being worked out. And of course, our union partners we have to continue to engage them. Some level of engagement has taken place and we will continue doing that. But just to make it simple, under the old system, you achieve 75% as your score when your performance management appraisal is done at the end of the year and you get an increment. The guy who gets 95%, he gets the very same increment. So there's no distinguishing between the two performances. And the question really is, it's only human to ask yourself, why wouldn't I therefore just settle for my 75 or my 76 and get my increment? Why would I go for a higher performance rating? So we are looking to reward performance in the truest sense.
And to incentivize it.
And also, certainly, to cause people to want to perform because something is waiting for them, which distinguishes their effort from the guy who is comfortable at the minimum. And so that is to come. In fact, we are looking to implement that at the end of the implementation of this compensation restructuring, which would be March 2025. So we are looking April 2025 to introduce the new element of performance management and compensation related.
Okay. And just to shift a little bit, I mean, you're both public sector workers. How has this been for you personally? Starting with Janice.
Okay, I guess. I think for some of us, me included, the expectations were not met. But
let's drill that down a little bit, because you work in the public sector and you, even though you're on the side of implementation, you're also employed to the Government of Jamaica. And how significant is this for you, given years of wage negotiations, getting 4 and so on percentage, and now being on the side where you're getting a larger?
Well, for me, what it indicates is that we were, for a number of jobs, we were closer to the market than we thought.
Okay.
So I think that is the element that would have
tempered
the expectations.
Okay. You, Mr. Jones?
All right. So I take it in two two phases. One, as an implementer and one who influence policy from where I sit. I see it as one of the best initiatives. I've been in the public sector going 42 years now, and it certainly was an absolute necessity. Came with its challenges, but I have always believed in the concept of the reform. And I am satisfied at this stage of my life and my profession that I have been part of a process that will help to move the public sector and the country forward. The expectations were there. Some were met, some were not met, because again, sometimes when people don't have the fullness of what you're trying to achieve, then they create their own expectations and it doesn't necessarily come through. But I think I have always believed in the wisdom of public sector workers. They know that's why we have the business of administering public business. They know that at the end of the day, this was to improve the service delivery, and they are seeing an alignment with that objective. Personally, as one, a public sector worker, as you say, I have seen improvement in my compensation, no doubt. I welcome it as I look forward to another couple of years in the public sector. I see my ability to survive beyond retirement improving because I see my pension improving. I see my ability to participate in the economy I'm improving when my pay advice shows a single figure and not just a figure of basic salary and allowances, but it shows a single figure. It shows permanence and stability in my employment, and I therefore, as a negotiator, I see that as a bargaining chip for me. And I'm sure that's the case with many thousands of public sector workers today. Some will realize it now, others will realize it down the road as you get closer to some life decisions. So for me, it's all good, came with challenges, but as a people who are intent on improvement, I see us getting there in the not too distant future.
I see Janice.
I'd like to endorse what the FS Jones said, especially about the pension, because all we used to have, especially for officers who were in receipt of traveling, that was one of the biggest allowances, and it was never pensionable. So it has now been rolled up, absorbed into your salary, and it is now pensionable. Yeah. So yes, I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the compensation restructure.
Yeah.
Especially for persons who are close to that age.
You don't want to say close to retirement.
That, yes.
And that brings us to a close for this episode of Beyond Reform. It has been a very interesting conversation. We hope our listeners, especially public sector workers, are clearer now on the new compensation system. My guests were Mr. Wayne Jones, Deputy Financial Secretary with responsibility for Strategic Human Resource Management, and Ms. Janice Stewart, Senior Director for Compensation, both from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for stopping by. And until next time, I'm Aniki Clark, inviting you to check out our website at publicsectortransformation.gov.jm for links to this and other episodes of the Beyond Reform podcast. Bye for now.